There's no quit. I'm sorry, I got that backwards. There's only quit in the Atlanta Falcons.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network in the entire galaxy. And today's Locked On Falcons is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your live NFL bets all season long. So I am, of course, your humble host, Aaron Freeman. And I think each and every one of you that is an everyday of the podcast, you are the reasons why the Locked On Podcast Network is the number one sports podcast network in the galaxy. Shout out to you, the everydayers. And we'll be talking about another way that you guys can show your support for this podcast and this network by joining an exclusive everydayer club later in today's episode. But just to be an everydayer that shows up each and every day, all you have to do is subscribe and follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So on today's episode, we'll break down this week 14 loss to the Seattle Seahawks 37-9, talk about how the Falcons quit and really kind of failed to capitalize on the opportunities that they had against the Seattle team early in this game. And Seattle was like, oh, we're the better team and we're going to prove it in the second half. We'll give James Pearce Jr. some love, right? And we're not going to give him too much love because I got to push an anti-Terry Fontenot agenda here on this podcast. But we'll also be talking about, why I've been slacking in my anti-Raheem Morris agenda, and we'll try to rectify that on today's episode. But basically, the Falcons failed to capitalize on their opportunities. They had several opportunities to kind of take early lead against the Seattle team, and we'll outline some of those opportunities that they failed to take advantage of. And then Seattle later in the game, when the Falcons were gift wrapping them opportunities, they fully took advantage of that, particularly in the second half, scoring 31 points in the second half to really blow this thing out the doors. But when you look at this game, the Falcons had a great start for their defense for basically 2.5 quarters. We'll break down that later in today's episode. And they also had two drives to sort of start this game in their first 2.5 quarters, where they started the ball in Seahawks territory, but they failed to capitalize it. The first time they got a field goal, and then the next time, off of a turnover, they failed to put the ball in the end zone, and they settled for a field goal, and then that field goal was blocked. Shout out to Matthew Bergeron. He looked like he blew that block on that particular play. And, the defense had played great for 2.5 quarters, but then the issue that seems like it feels like an issue almost every single week, where the opposing offense gets into their 2-minute drill, and this defense really can't stop anybody in those situations. And the Seahawks were able to go down the field, get a field goal. And then, of course, the Falcons had an opportunity prior to that point where they had a touchdown. It got taken off the board on a fade to Darnell Mooney because he stepped out of bounds, and the referees were like, oh, he didn't reestablish himself in bounds before catching that touchdown, that 30-yard touchdown on a fade. And so that led to one of those field goals for the Falcons in the first half, the second of those field goals in the first half to take a 6-6 game into halftime. And, for those of you that are, relatively new everydayers of the podcast, the longtime everydayers know that I don't sit here and harp too much on officiating. We will point out when we think officials blow the call, but you're going to win some, you're going to lose some. It's just part of the game. And you're the Falcons. You shouldn't have been in a situation where you needed that touchdown. And even then, what happened in the second half, it pretty much negated pretty much anything that could happen. Because after that point, third quarter woes. We know this team is terrible in the third quarter, right? They go opening kickoff, 100-yard kick return for a touchdown from Rashid Shaheed. Bijan then fumbles on the next drive. Seattle turns that into 7 points. Kirk Cousins throws an interception later. Seattle turns that, I believe, into a field goal or points or whatever. They were able to get another touchdown. They started to attack A.J. Terrell with some crossers to Jackson Smith and Jigba. They got a 30-yard play off of it, and then they got a 27-yard touchdown off of that. And so the Falcons wound up with 3 turnovers in this game, 2 Kirk Cousins interceptions, as well as a Bijan fumble. And Seattle got 17 points off of that. And the Falcons got an interception in this game. Mike Hughes got an interception in this game. Mike Hughes, of all people, I know he heard the slander, and played reasonably well for the first half. And the Falcons were not able to convert that into that. That was the drive that led to the block field goal. And then, the third quarter finally ends. Thank God, because and then the Falcons get into scoring range, and get inside the Seahawks 10, and they settle for a field goal. And, they were down 17 at that point, inside the 10-yard line. It was 4th and 3 or 4th and 2, whatever it was, and they settled for the field goal. And I just assumed that they were going to go for it in that situation. And the broadcast team was like, oh, that's the right call. You kick in that situation because you're down 17. You need 3 scores. You're not guaranteed at the start of the fourth quarter to get, 3 more possessions, especially if you don't make it. And that all makes logical sense. But, the Falcons did only get 2 more possessions the rest of the game, or technically 3, but at that point it was with 20 seconds left. And they got 0 points. Those 2 possessions resulted in an interception and a turnover on downs. And the Seattle scored on their 2 possessions right after that situation. So it was basically moot at that point in time. And to me, I get the logic behind going for those points, but that's where I mean when I talk about the quit in this team, because it was just I think early in the game when they went for it, settle for points, don't put yourself in a hole early on. I had no problem with the Falcons kicking the field goal though, and not being aggressive there, especially on the 4th and 3, where it's 0-0 at that point in time. And there's no reason to think that the Falcons, without Drake London, their main guy on critical downs, are going to convert a 4th and 3. The fact that the last 2 games, the first 3rd down conversion in this game was a slant to Bijan. The fact that they're creating plays on 3rd downs to Bijan the last 2 games is basically telling you, how bad this receiver core is. And so I get that. But when you're down 17 points and you need a touchdown to just even try to break this thing, and you settle for the field goal, that to me is where the Falcons kind of quit in this game. And that's kind of the story of this team. It's just they just quit every single time that they have. And that's a testament to their poor coaching, which we'll get into more at the end of today's episode when I break down my anti-Raheem Morris agenda, which I haven't necessarily done on this podcast. But that's to me the kind of the story of this game. This game really personifies the Falcons season. They start off strong, they give you some hope and optimism, and then they hit some adversity, and they just do not respond well at all to adversity. And it has been a slide. They've won 1 out of the last 8 games after starting the season 3-2. Again, that Bills game, that week after that Monday Night Bills game feels like it was ages ago. You remember how high we were. It's just the vibes. It's so similar to 2023, where the Falcons started off 2-0, and the vibes were so great. It was they're going to do something, right? And of course not. And that's just the problem with the team. I don't know what else to say. Again, I'm contractually obligated to be here, and so I appreciate every one of you that is also still here, rocking with me the rest of the season. So we will talk about the one good thing coming out of this game, which is James Pearce Jr. in this defense. And we'll talk about why I continue to not give James Pearce the amount of love that I think a lot of people who listen to this podcast think I should give him. And again, it's part of my anti-Terry Fontenot agenda, and we'll get into all of that as well as the Kirk Cousins chaos meter as we wrap up today's or continue today's Locked On Falcons. Today's episode is brought to you by Aura Frames. If you're shopping for the perfect gift this holiday season and you're looking for something meaningful, personal, and guaranteed to get that reaction, Aura Frames is the gift that delivers every single time. It's not just something you wrap, it's a way to share the memories, because Aura isn't your average picture frame. You can preload the frame with photos before gifting it, so when they plug it in, the memories are already there. No apps to figure out, no setup headaches, just instant smiles. The perfect gift for grandparents, parents, and newlyweds, anyone who loves photos. So for a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com, and you'll get $35 off on Aura's best-selling carver mat frames, named #1 by Wirecutter by using the promo code Locked On at checkout. That's AURA, frames.com. Promo code Locked On. This deal is exclusive to our listeners, and frames sell out fast. So order yours now to get it in time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. And today's episode is also brought to you by Georgia Access. Have your health or family needs changed lately? Georgia's got you covered. Georgia Access is our state's marketplace for Georgians to compare, apply, and enroll in health insurance plans that offer the best value for their individual needs. Open enrollment is happening right now. Don't wait. Visit georgiaaccess.gov today. Georgia Access, health insurance for Georgia by Georgia. And I once again want to thank all of you that make Locked On Falcons your first listen of the day. And you are the reason why Locked On is the number one sports podcast network. And if you're an everydayer of this show, as I know many of you are, and you never miss a show, you're already one of the everydayers, but you can sort of make it official now for as little as $5 a month by joining the Everydayer Club today, a community for the most loyal Locked On Falcons fans. Check out the link in the show notes or head to lockedonfalcons.supercast.com for more information. So let's talk about James Pearce Jr. I got called out on Twitter by at the General 387. He said, "Hey, they only rushed 3 and they got home. Locked On Falcons. Hey, Aaron, make sure you mention this later today," referring to the James Pearce Jr. sack on the opening drive, where he's right. The Falcons only rushed 3 on the third down, and James Pearce was able to get a solid win against Charles Cross, the Seahawks left tackle, and get that sack. And James Pearce is doing his best to beat the allegations, right? Started out the game hot, and then much like the rest of the Falcons team, then kind of no-showed. And again, I'm not doing that to throw shade at James Pearce. I'm just explaining because I know a lot of people did not watch the game today because y'all are checked out on the season, except for you all the everydayers, right? You know, he tweaked his quad on the next series. That's an excuse, you know, but that was basically his one win in this entire game. But hey, you know, we'll take it at this point in time. Now, Arnold Ebiketie, I believe, led the team with 3 pressures today, but of course, Arnold Ebiketie didn't get a sack because Arnold Ebiketie doesn't finish. At least James Pearce finishes. That's the thing we will praise about that. But, you know, that speaks to JPJ's. And so to you, the General 387, I mentioned it on the podcast, but, you know, let's talk about the defense getting their flowers. You know, AJ deserves his flowers, right? I wasn't confident that the Falcons would try to man him up with Jackson Smith and Jigba in this game, and they did early in the game, and it was very effective for basically the first half. He basically kept JSN in check. I think JSN had 2 catches for almost 60 yards on one of those drives in this third quarter. But outside of that, I think he finished with like 9 catches for 90 yards. So that basically means, or something like that, 7 catches for 90 yards. So that basically means, he only caught like 5 passes for like 30, 40 yards or something like that. And that's exactly what you wanted to see from AJ in this game. Unfortunately, it felt like the Seahawks figured out, they're playing man coverage, so we'll just run crossing routes. That's the most difficult thing to defend in man coverage. And the Falcons safeties weren't necessarily in position to help AJ on those particular instances, and the Falcons pressure wasn't there, right? And early on in the game, the Falcons pressure was there. They were able to get some critical pressures, including James Pearce Jr. on that sack. Then you had the next series, Arnold Ebiketie had a pressure in the red zone. Then you had the blocked field goal for the Falcons, and they started off the next series with a sack from Kentavious Street, as well as there was another pressure for AK early in the game. And so you had that good pressure up front. You had the good coverage on the back end, taking away JSN in the first half. And so that was the big reason why the Falcons for 2.5 quarters or 2 3/4 quarters, right, until the final 2-minute drill, the defense was able, to lock down one of the best offenses in the NFL. And so kudos goes to the defense, right? They started strong, but then it stopped because, it is what it is. Like Seattle, there's a reason why the Seahawks are now 10-3 and potentially in a position to be the number 1 seed in the NFC. You're not going to be able to shut them down for more than 2 quarters. And the Falcons, giving them a run for their money for a quarter and a half or 2 quarters or whatever, was all you could really expect, and the offense really needed to carry their weight, and they weren't able to carry the weight. So we'll circle back to the James Pearce Jr. trade and why I don't give JPJ enough credit on this podcast as part of my anti-Terry Fontenot agenda. But let's get the Kirk Cousins chaos meter out of the way. For those of you not familiar here with the Kirk Cousins chaos meter, every week on these rapid reactions, we break down the Falcons quarterback. Before with Michael Penix was the Penix pump meter, where Kirk is the chaos meter, which comes from like Locked On Vikings, because Kirk tends to be a chaotic quarterback. Kirk had 2 interceptions in today's game, but like they were not really on Kirk. They were on good defensive plays or bad offensive plays from the receivers. And so Kirk gets a level 2 chaos meter. Level 2 is basically he managed the game. Again, we'll probably go back and look at the film and be like, yeah, it was a pretty meh performance from Kirk, but that's pretty typical at this point in time. Kirk out here getting checks, like just like me, right? Out here getting checks. So I see you, Kirk. I see you right now. Let's give you right, just out here getting checks. He don't want to be here. He's been held hostage the whole time. So Kirk is just out here. I'm gonna give you level 2 performance, and it's up for the rest of y'all to take care of business. Because I'm just here because I gotta be here, right? So they don't find me, right? You know, Kirk don't want to be here. So I salute you, Kirk, on that front. But let's talk about why I continue to hate on James Pearce Jr. Right? The reason is because Terry Fontenot's got to go, man. And so JPJ, I need you to chill, man, because far too many people are sitting here praising that trade. Like, oh, JPJ is winning the trade single-handedly by getting these sacks 5 games in a row now with sacks. And I'm just like, JPJ, you got to chill, my guy, because we got to get Terry Fontenot out the paint, my guy. And you cannot play this well to make people forgive Terry Fontenot for the horrifically bad trade that he's had. And right. And JPJ's off to, has had a great November and December so far after a very quiet October, and, is having a great year one. He's elevated our expectations, all that stuff, on pace to have the best rookie season for a Falcons pass rusher that we've ever seen, all that stuff and more. And it's great in isolation, but in the bigger picture, guys, you got to keep your eye on the prize. The Falcons have to get Terry Fontenot, their general manager, up out the paint. And sitting here praising that trade is not helping matters. And that's why you will not see me on this podcast ever praising that trade until the day after Terry Fontenot is fired. And then all of a sudden, hey, we're going to be sitting here being the biggest fans of James Pearce Jr. on the Locked On Falcons podcast. I can promise you that, ladies and gentlemen, once Terry Fontenot is fired. But again, the reason why I don't praise that trade is basically the same reasons I gave last week. It's like the Falcons basically constantly believe themselves to be one piece away. And this trade embodies that, where they're like, oh, all we need to do is fix our pass rush. We have no other holes. And they have no path to improve this offseason, without a first-round pick, right? A first-round pick would do so much wonders. And again, this is not a James Pearce Jr. Sorry, guys. James Pearce Jr. Situation. I was thinking of James Earl Jones. Insert your Darth Vader, soundbite right there. But like, the issue is like we've discovered this year, right? This is the problem with Terry Fontenot. This is why Terry Fontenot has to be fired. We'll get to Raheem Morris in a second. But like, this is the reason why Terry Fontenot has to be fired, because they constantly convince. This has been the Falcons' problem for 8 years, guys. They constantly convince we're just one piece away. We right? Raheem and Terry were like, oh, in 24, we just got to solve the quarterback issue and we're good to go. And they haven't solved the quarterback issue, right? Again, you can blame injuries, all that stuff, but they haven't solved the problem. And it's like, oh, well, we're going to solve the pass rush. And it's like, you have solved the pass rush. The Falcons, or what, 43 sacks or whatever, 45 sacks, whatever, they're going to have 50 sacks. I remember preseason, talking about projecting the Falcons sacks. We're like, we're not going to project 50 sacks because that would be ridiculous, because there's no way the Falcons of all teams can get 50 sacks. And we got, we're like 4 or 5 sacks away from that with, 4 games left. And so we're almost there, guys. But guess what? It don't mean nothing because the Falcons are 4-9. And this is the problem. Like they're not one piece away. We see all the flaws in their pass catchers. We see this offensive line needing to be rebuilt. Man, a top 10 pick would do wonders to solve that offensive tackle need that is inevitable right now. Beefing up the interior D line, right? There's a couple of D tackles that are worth top 10 picks. And boy knows, again, Mike Hughes played better this week, but boy knows the Falcons need another cornerback to tag it. Man, wouldn't it be wonderful if they had 2 AJ Terrell caliber corners on the outside to lock up the JSNs and the Mecca Agbukas and all that stuff, right? this, and that's the problem with the Falcons is they're constantly feeling like, oh, we've solved it. We figured it out. And they haven't figured it out. And that's why I hate the James Pearce Jr. trade. Not because I hate James Pearce Jr., not because JPJ is not playing at a high level. It's because the Falcons, it's a bigger issue for the Falcons, their overall issues over this last decade of constantly believing that we're one piece away, and they're not one piece away. And that gets to why I haven't been focusing as much attention on Raheem Morris, because, I think a big part of why I haven't been killing Raheem Morris as much as people think I should on this podcast, we'll get to it, is because I think a lot of people are basically doing the same thing, which is convincing once we get a competent head coach in here, all of our problems go away. And we'll break down why I don't believe that, but we'll also break down why the Falcons cannot sit here and run it back with Raheem Morris after this season moving forward. Even if it's the quote unquote fair thing to do, it's not the right thing to do. And we'll break that down, guys, as we wrap up today's Locked On Falcons. Now, the World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time in over 30 years. It's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets to this massive venue is going to be very hard, but it's not going to be that hard with Game Time, who's going to come in clutch and finally give the fans the advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track the price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. And we love Game Time because the price you see is the price you pay. No hidden fees at checkout. And we love the panoramic seat view. So what you see is what you get. So take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets or tickets to other sports, concert, or events near you with Game Time by downloading the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Again, download the app, make an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Game Time. And today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast, and one big play can change everything. And FanDuel is going to make those opportunities more exciting, where you're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. You can place bets on FanDuel as the action unfolds from every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. And live betting is best when the game starts to shift, whether it's JSN getting hot, whether it's JPJ getting home for a sack, or that momentum flip after multiple turnovers in a Falcons Seahawks game. And FanDuel's going to let you jump into every single moment. So make sure you stay locked in with those live bets and money lines that adjust instantly, those player props that go up and down as guys heat up or cool down. So if you're ready to get right into the middle of the action this season, make sure you visit FanDuel, download the FanDuel app, and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. So this comes from an insider who hit me up. And for those of you that don't know, the Locked On Falcons insiders, you can join at the link in the description below, as well as join that Everydayer Club at the link in the description below. But an insider hit me up last week and being like, Aaron, basically paraphrasing, Aaron, I don't think you spend enough time knocking the coaching staff. And that's a fair criticism on this podcast. And the main reason why is part of it is, I know I'm not going to beat the contrarian allegations, but like, to me, I watch and listen to other shows, and that's all they focus on. And, I don't focus on it because I don't think I need to come on this podcast and tell you why this team is a poorly coached team. And part of it is that we were among the first people here on Locked On Falcons to talk about the poor coaching. That was a big talking point this offseason, coming off the heels of the 2024 season, where I think a lot of people just boiled that season down to Kirk Cousins lying about his injury, and that's why the season fell apart. And we here on this podcast, me and my ego, the royal we, basically like, no, it was a poorly coached season. That's why the Falcons underachieved, because they were not coaching, right? We talked about how if you looked at their 9 losses and looked and ranked the reasons why they lost each one of those 9 games, not to say it was one reason why they lost the game, but the number one reason, the quarterback, Kirk Cousins, was the number one reason in basically one game. Now, he was probably the number 2, 3, or 4 reason in multiple games, but the number one reason in one game. The coaching staff was the number one reason in 4 games. That Steelers game, that Washington game, that final Carolina game, and that Denver game, where this coaching staff, to me, underachieved. We spent all the offseason talking about Zach Robinson's poor play calling, while everybody else was like, oh, Zach did a good job in year 1, right? And now all of a sudden everybody else is coming for Zach Robinson. So that's part of it. Again, part of that is just maybe that's a Aaron Freeman ego issue, why we use the royal we on this podcast where I'm like, oh, that thing that you guys heard from me last year, everybody else is now talking about this year. It's like, while everybody else is now catching up to my 2024 takes, in 2025, they're all going to be sitting here catching up to my 2025 takes in 2026 when it comes to the roster and the holes there. But part of it is a fair criticism. We don't spend enough time talking about Raheem, but we spent a lot of time this offseason talking about this coaching staff talks the talk, but they don't wind up backing it up by walking the walk. And to me, it's very clear watching each and every Sunday that they are not walking the walk. And we could absolutely spend more time focusing on that and me explaining all the reasons why this is a poorly coached team. That is a fair criticism of this podcast. I will own up to that. But like part of the reason why I don't focus on that is because I think this is the same thing that happened in 2020. The same thing happened in 2023. And I feel like it's happening again in 2025. It's other people hyper fixate on the coaching issues. And it leads to fans basically believing that this team has one problem and it's just coaching. And I don't think that's the case. And so we try to outline the other issues that this team is dealing with. Right. But yes, the coaching staff is not good. The special teams coordinator, everybody's clamoring for Marquise Williams to get fired after another bad day from the special teams. But, I'm not going to sit here and defend Marquise Williams, but I'm like, who's going to take over special teams? You can fire a guy, but especially on a short week, like, is that going to solve the problem? Probably not with his assistant coach. But, maybe you have somebody in Stephen King, who I'm sure 99% of you listening didn't even know was the assistant special teams coach, right? Zach Robinson. His play calling has not been good, right? He's had a couple of good games this year, and we've tried to give Zach the grace to show his year 2 improvement. The play action has improved. The red zone offense has improved, but overall, it's still not a well-run offense, and that was on display today where, again, you heard me complain about this on the Falcon Squad post-game show, where it's like, why are we designing plays for David Sills and Devin Tompkins and whatnot? I don't get that, but, that's the Falcons and their choices at wide receiver that they were sitting here talking about. Oh, we're good at wide receiver all summer long, and then it's been a absolute disaster. And again, that's the whole issue of talking the talk, right? Whereas like they're talking a big, Casey Washington's doing it. Casey Washington a healthy scratch for 3 weeks now, right? We're good. We got Kadero Hodge. He's a solid. Well, Kadero Hodge is not getting any opportunities. And I'm like, why are you playing David Sills over Kadero Hodge? I will not understand that, but we'll leave that aside for another day. And you've seen those issues, right? They talk the talk, right? Raheem was like, I remember during the summer, he was like, oh, Darnell Mooney not missing time, due to his broken collarbone that we found out later on, is going to be a non-issue. Him and Penix have, connected so many times over the offseason that he's not going to skip a beat when he comes back from his injury. And then Darnell Mooney has basically been a no-show this entire season. He's made like one good play all season long. Had one good play today, got wiped out, nullified on a penalty. But like that's basically it. It's about 2 good plays the entire season, right? And so that's what I mean when I say they talk the talk and they don't walk the walk. And yeah, we absolutely should spend more time on this podcast talking about all the things that this coaching staff has gotten wrong. And it's, to me, the reason why, if it's not been clear to you guys, I do not believe that Raheem Morris should be back in Atlanta next year. And to me, my worry is ownership is not going to think that way. Ownership is going to look at the improvement of the defense and being like, oh, they're trending in the right direction. This young defense and Jeff Ulbrich, and let's keep this thing moving. And again, this is not me making the case for keeping Raheem, but I'm just sitting here going, like, if you squint and you ignore, you just hyper focus on like the one things that are the positives and ignore all the negatives, you can convince yourself. You can delude yourself. That's a better word. You can delude yourself that staying the course is the right move if you're ownership here. And that is my biggest concern, is that ownership is going to look at the defense, this young defense, and say, hey, they're trending up. And look at how the red zone offense has, they were like 0 for 4 or whatever they were today. But like, prior to that, they were the #1 red zone offense in the league for the previous month or whatever it was. And then we'll look at the play action passing. It's like, oh, well, if we can just get what we were doing in the middle of the season, in the second half of the season, man, this team is a playoff team. And it's like, no, they're not, because what's going to end up happening if you retain this coaching staff is the same inconsistency that we see week to week. It's just going to return. You're going to see good moments. You're going to see positives. That's the problem with the team. They're inconsistent, right? This coaching staff does not, and you see this with the Seahawks, where like the details are there for the Seahawks that you don't see with the Atlanta Falcons, right? And to me, it basically boils down. How I will explain it is my frustration with this team is, over the last 17 games that they've played under Raheem Morris, they are 6-11, right? But every single time this team has an opportunity. And this is one of the reasons why I push back against the fan base in the media, because I think that they contribute to this as well by hyper fixating on the coaching issue. Is they basically, but more importantly, the team does this. And so we'll leave the fans aside for that. But like, this team always convinces themselves, even though the product on the field is a 6-11 team, right? And they have shown that consistently over the last 8 seasons, that they are much closer to a 6-11 team, whether they win 7 games or 8 games like last year, than the opposite, which is an 11-16. But this team constantly convinces themselves, no, actually, we're secretly an 11-16, even though the product on the field clearly states they're a 6-11 team. We're actually an 11-6 team, and we just got to solve this one problem. Whether it's the James Pearce Jr., we got to get the edge rusher, we got to solve the quarterback. And now it's going to be, we just got to upgrade, the play caller or the head coach, and we'll be, an 11-6 team. And basically, the point I keep doing on this podcast, and the reason why we don't spend as much time on the coaching, is, to me, we're trying to outline why this team is actually a 6-11 team. They are not that good. It's not to say that they're talentless. Right? It's not to say that they don't have positive pieces, but at the end of the day, this is a 6-11 football team, guys. And to me, the future of this team with Raheem Morris at the helm is just more of the same, right? Maybe they can get slightly better than 6-11. Maybe they get 7-10. Maybe they even get back to 8-9 next year with some of the improvements that they will have difficulty making with no cap space and no first round pick. But maybe they can piece it together and get back to being that same inconsistent but underwhelming football team. And to me, I just sit here and I go like, why, Arthur Blank? Why would you do that? And there's a lot of people out there that would sit here and it's the fair thing to do. You got to give Raheem 3 years. And I'm like, it's fair to give Raheem 3 years because that's typically what you do in the NFL, and see if he can figure it out. See if he can hire a new special teams coordinator after the season. See if he can get an offensive coordinator, a capable offensive coordinator is more capable than Zach Robinson, or retain Zach Robinson and hope that Zach Robinson finally, with some of the positives that you've seen from him this year, can do that for 17 games. Good luck with that. But, give Raheem another chance and see, what Michael Penix can do and all that stuff. That's a fair conversation. But the thing I pose to Arthur Blank right now is like, do you want to be fair or do you want to win football games? Because if the goal is to win football games, and I believe, Arthur Blank, that is your goal, you don't care about fairness, okay? You care about winning football games. And you're not going to win football games with Raheem Morris at the helm. So hopefully the Falcons will make the right call. I'm not one of these people that sits here and goes like, you got to fire Raheem tomorrow, and if he's still the coach on Monday, blah, blah. You got a short week coming up against Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Forcing that on an interim head coach is not solving any problems, okay? So you make that decision. You make the right call at the end of the season. All is forgiven. All is forgiven. Arthur Blank, we'll see. If you clean house and you start over, again, it's not going to be pretty, guys. It's not going to be pretty, but what is going on in Atlanta is not pretty. And sitting here and pretending that this team is like a couple of pieces away from 11-6, as we have been in denial. And I say we, not meaning me, because, if you, Mr. Negativity, Mr. Drew, here on the podcast, ain't been pushing that narrative at all. It's been hopeful that we would go 11-6. Hey, if everything goes right, we might go 11-6. But like, we sit here going like, this is a 6-11 football team. And hopefully Arthur Blank realizes that and will make the right moves and be like, we got to start fresh. But like, I sit here and I go like, you gotta pull the trigger. But we will see. So I appreciate all of you guys for hearing me, defend my lack of Raheem agenda and continuing to push my anti-Terry agenda on the podcast. And for those of you that are everydayers, make sure you hit that link in the description as an everydayer club. That's a new feature that we are unveiling here for folks, where you get not only, your favorite show ad-free, but you also get access to a members-only Discord channel. And you can hit that at Locked On Falcons at .supercast.com. And, of course, if you had Locked On Falcons on your Spotify wrap, make sure you prove it, guys. And you can secure a free month of our brand new Everydayer Club by just tagging our national Locked On Podcast Network account on any social media platform. And we'll drop you a code. And if you're one of the first to join the Everydayer Club, you will get that new show ad-free and exclusive access to the members-only Discord channel for Locked On Falcons. And you will get that free for a month. So go check it out at the link in the description below. Appreciate you guys. I hope there are better days for the Atlanta Falcons, but it ain't going to be in 2025. So we can hope for 2026 will bring better favor for this football team. But until then, appreciate you. Continue to make Locked On Falcons your first listen. Check out Locked On NFL as your second listen to get the scoop on all Week 14 action. It's all part of Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network on the planet. Your team every day.